He was clearly a graduate from a prestigious university, yet he had a dream of just lying around. When his parents asked him how he planned to support himself, this was his answer.
Justement, je me disais que comme j'étais le fruit de vos entrailles, que vous pourriez m'aider.
Oui. Ah oui, on va t'aider, oui, bien sûr.
The next second, he was kicked out of the house. Although his college classmate, Anna, kindly took him in, he still had to split the rent. There was also another roommate, Bruno. They were all recent college graduates. Bruno dreamed of becoming a sports journalist, but after 86 failed job applications, he ended up with a job driving a hearse. Anna was interning at a publishing house. Her biggest dream was to travel the world, but reality often fell short. After graduation, she had thrown herself into work, so her dream had been delayed indefinitely. As a result, she often made funny faces and snuck into tourists' photos, letting her image travel the world with others' journeys, a different way of fulfilling her travel dreams. Simon, on the other hand, had no dreams, and nothing he felt he had to do. He had no ambition, no interest in success. He just wanted to live peacefully, and then leave peacefully. His greatest passion was lying down, and it didn't matter where. And so, Simon slept in the living room, where the rent was cheaper. However, sleeping in an unfamiliar environment still came with some risk. In the middle of the night, Bruno crept up to him. He had suspected Simon was pretending to be down and out, to get close to Anna. But for someone like Simon, who just wanted to lie flat, dating came with too many responsibilities and obligations, which would interfere with his low-energy lifestyle. Bruno was relieved. He taught Simon many money-saving tricks. He also suggested that in France, if you were over 25 and couldn't find a job, you could apply for welfare benefits. So, the next day, Simon went to apply. But when the caseworker saw that the welfare applicant was a young man, he was not pleased, and demanded that Simon provide proof of unemployment. After gathering the documents, he would have to come back in a month. So Simon borrowed Bruno's 86 rejection letters, and changed the name on them to his own. To make it convincing, he went to the mailboxes near each company, and mailed the letters to himself. Bruno told him that with all this effort, he might as well just apply for a job. Rejection letters were easy to get, but Simon was afraid he might actually get hired. He had spent 10 years in college, and earned 3 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, and a PhD. It would be hard for a company to turn him down. In his view, however, a fulfilling life didn't necessarily require a job. After all, no one on their deathbed ever felt satisfied, just because they had paid taxes.
Oui, mais jamais personne n'a dit non plus « Ah, c'est bon, j'ai rien foutu de ma vie, je peux mourir tranquille. »
Épicure a dit, celui qui ne sait pas se contenter de peu ne sera jamais content de rien.
Simon found joy in small things. He loved reading, loved watching passers-by from the balcony, and he loved walking through the crowds and strolling along the Seine. Every sunset was different. One day, he discovered something interesting. Every day, Anna wrote a fake diary, and it was specifically meant for Bruno, who had a crush on her. Anna knew he would snoop through her things. To punish him, she wrote about all sorts of strange habits in her diary, and left it where Bruno could find it. Previously, she had written that she liked men who shaved their legs. For a while after that, Bruno often showed up around her with smooth legs. Today, Anna decided to add another entry. Men who slurp from straws were the sexiest. That night, Bruno's beer bottle had a straw in it. A month later, Simon brought his documents to apply for welfare again, but the caseworker was new. Apparently, the previous one had suddenly broken down, grabbed a plant from the office, and started smashing things on the street, and was fired. When Simon handed over his carefully prepared unemployment papers, the caseworker didn't even want to look at them. To him, those documents were cold and meaningless. He wanted to know what had happened to this young man applying for welfare, to make him lose his will to strive. Simon said he liked to idle away the hours. He liked pauses, waiting, and the process of getting ready for things. To him, imagining doing something was more satisfying than actually doing it. Anyone else hearing this would have thought Simon was lacking ambition, but the caseworker felt a faint resonance. He, too, had never truly loved his job. When he was a child, he loved the butter cookies his mother made. It was the most comforting taste of his childhood. His dream had always been to open a creperie, but making crepes had never seemed like a respectable job. Simon said no one really cared about what was respectable. If you love making crepes, then go. But life wasn't that simple. Supporting a family took money. Simon agreed with him. If there were a guaranteed minimum income each month, then people would have the chance to live the life they truly wanted. Perhaps inspired by Simon's philosophy of lying flat, the caseworker approved his welfare application. He even enthusiastically invited him to stop by the welfare office anytime for a chat. And so, Simon successfully began living his dream life of doing nothing. He spent his days zoning out in the park, talking big with Bruno, or chatting with the caseworker. It was an easy, carefree life. But Bruno, who drove a hearse, after witnessing 23 deaths, completely fell apart. Even though a client tried to comfort him, saying her husband had passed peacefully and had lived a wonderful life, Bruno couldn't shake the pain. And so, Bruno lost his 87th job. Seeing her 2 roommates staying home all day, Anna organized a college reunion. Among those present, some were teaching at universities, some were project managers, some were married with 2 kids, some had just been laid off, and one was sleeping on a friend's couch and on welfare. When they learned that the former top student had fallen to living on welfare, they all looked down on him. They said Simon was wasting his talent, that it was the people who worked and paid taxes bosses who were funding his vacation. They all agreed that Simon was a parasite on society. In the past, he had been able to ignore such ridicule, but this time, Simon got a little defensive. He questioned, "Does sharing the same sunlight with a poor person make you uncomfortable?" The other person smiled and said, "If everyone were like you, then how could this society continue to progress?" Seeing everyone attacking Simon, Anna couldn't help but speak up. In her view, Simon had never used lies to cover up his choices. He wasn't a parasite. He was simply living a different kind of life. Then, Anna made an excuse and quickly left with Simon. On the way home, they saw a homeless man sleeping on the street. Simon, though poor himself, gave him some change. Perhaps this homeless man, like him, had looked up at the moon on a street full of sixpence. As Christmas approached, none of them planned to go home. Bruno worked as a Santa Claus to earn extra money, while Simon's main daily task was to buy some cookies and savor them in the park. But after sitting in the park for a few days, a strange woman came over and accused him of sitting there all day yesterday and was there again today. She felt disturbed by his presence. Simon was puzzled. He was just sitting there reading. Was that wrong? A police officer on patrol intervened. The woman said, "We are all rushing to work, taking our kids to school, but you sit here, watching us busily go about our lives. It makes us uncomfortable." Passers-by agreed. They all thought Simon should find something to fill his time, rather than sit there doing nothing. Even if he really didn't want to work, he could walk a dog, go grocery shopping, or even beg on the street. At least then people would know what he was doing. But Simon didn't want to beg, so the police officer fined him 35 euros for disturbing public order. And so, Simon, who had always been content to lie flat, for the first time, thought about getting a job. The caseworker was delighted. He finally saw signs of Simon's life moving forward. With his help, Simon found a cushy job as a content moderator. All he had to do was sit in front of a screen and watch TV, and he got paid. Life was pleasant and easy again, until the 12th day on the job. A news clip from 2006 caught his attention. A woman was talking about the 1960s, when her parents' generation had fought for their dreams, and contrasted it with the current situation of young people, struggling just to hold on to their jobs. Were we living for the sake of life, or just running to avoid being left behind? Perhaps that subtle boundary could only be clearly perceived when we truly stopped. Simon felt a deep connection. At 29, for the first time in his life, he felt the thrill of love. The object is that unknown girl mentioned in the news. Unfortunately, his boss caught him watching it, and assumed he had some kind of strange fetish. Simon's first job ended. After repeated failures, Bruno was also tired of the struggle. He quit his job and followed Simon's example, finding satisfaction in small things. Anna, however, still left early and returned late, and rarely joined them for fun. Life went on easy and quiet, until one day, Anna brought her new boyfriend home. He was the lead singer of a band. They had been together for 2 months. Bruno was crushed and said nothing. Simon acted like nothing had happened, completely missing the strange look in Anna's eyes. The next day, Bruno decided to leave. He realized he had been stuck in place for 4 months. Even worse, he would turn 25 in a month. Although he could apply for welfare, not everyone wanted to live that way. He wanted a job he loved, and a person he loved, and his own apartment. Perhaps fate was kind. On his 90th attempt, Bruno finally landed a job as a sports commentator, and the company provided housing. So, he happily moved out of the shared apartment. Simon moved from the living room into Bruno's old room. Strangely, though, he wasn't as happy as he had imagined. After Bruno left, the apartment became eerily quiet. For the first time, Simon felt loneliness. For the first time, he began to wonder about his future. It turned out that after getting used to company, the peace of being alone could become unbearable. However, Anna's sudden confession broke the last silence. From the moment they first met, she had been drawn to him. She loved his handsome, carefree style, and envied his untethered, easygoing heart. She had wanted him to move in, because she hoped for a beautiful encounter between them. But unfortunately, Simon had done nothing. He talked about enjoying peace, but deep down, he was more afraid than anyone. Afraid of getting hurt, afraid of trying hard and ending up with nothing. The best way to avoid failure was to do nothing, but that was wrong.
Avance-toi bien maintenant, je te plaît. Alors maintenant, j'aimerais que tu quittes cet appartement dès que tu pourras. Marco et moi, on va vivre ensemble. Je reconnais qu'il n'est pas parfait, il a des défauts, mais... Bon, moi, il est là, il est vivant.
Simon had never had his facade pierced so bluntly before. The next morning, he quietly moved out of the apartment. Luckily, Bruno took him in. Simon suddenly realized how boring his life really was. The caseworker told him, work is meant to fight the boredom of life. If you do nothing all day, rest itself becomes uninteresting. So, he told Simon, it was time to truly start living. It was easy to say, but when it came to actually doing it, Simon was lost. He had no idea where to begin. Then, he saw a little boy learning to ride a bicycle.
Tu veux qu'on essaie d'enlever des petits trous? Mais que je tombe. Je te rattraperai.
Simon's heart stirred. Maybe it was time for him to take off his own training wheels. So he got on a train back to his hometown, and asked his mother the same question. Her affirmative answer gave him great comfort. Hearing that his son was back, his usually stern father left work early. He discovered his father wasn't really stern at all. He greeted him with a warm hug, and asked how he'd been. Simon thought he meant work, but his father simply said,
D'abord, je veux savoir comment tu vas, puis après on parlera de ce que tu fais si tu veux.
It turned out his parents' love had never been about expectations for success, but simply about caring for him. Simon finally understood the depth of that love, and found the key to truly experiencing the real world. But life's surprises often come when least expected. On his way back, he ran head-on into an escaped brown bear. The circus handlers told him not to show fear, or the bear would attack. Simon looked at the seemingly ferocious bear, and suddenly understood. This wasn't a bear. It was life itself, which everyone had to face. It might wear a fierce face. It might make you feel afraid, but the more you retreated, the more it would consume you. The only thing to do was face it bravely. He treated it like an old friend and told it a story. Gradually, its ferocity faded, and it sat quietly beside him to listen. When the story ended, it was time for Simon to truly start living. With the caseworker's help, Simon found a job selling mattresses. It was only a 2-week temp job, but he quickly became the top salesperson, thanks to his extensive experience with lying flat. After all, he was an expert in the field. Sometimes, he would lie down on the job. When the manager saw him, instead of scolding him, he praised him for truly experiencing the product. Because he lay down so well, Simon was hired full-time. One day, he saw the woman from that old news clip. Faced with this unexpected encounter, his old self might have retreated, but now he was a top salesman. So, while successfully selling a mattress, Simon also successfully sold himself. After they got together, he discovered they shared many strange quirks. For example, they talked while brushing their teeth, and even though the words were mumbled, they could both understand each other. Later, as his career grew, he opened his own bedding store. He still sold mattresses with the same dedication, but eventually, Simon found his ultimate goal in life, to be a house husband. He loved teaching children to ride bikes, and loved lying in bed talking with them. Simon's attitude toward life seemed to influence those around him. The caseworker later quit his job, and returned to his hometown to open a creperie. Bruno officially became a sports journalist. He was still single, but happy. As for Anna, they never saw each other again. Not long after Simon moved out, she and her boyfriend broke up. Then, many years later, he saw a photo a friend had taken in Japan. It seemed Anna had also let go of her practical concerns, and was learning to enjoy life freely. The camera panned to a familiar corner, with the same bustling crowds. But this time, Simon, holding his partner's hand, walked calmly against the flow. They were not bound by conventional rules, simply walking their own path. And suddenly, the crowd seemed to shift direction, moving with them. Simon hadn't changed everyone. He had simply found a way, in this restless society, to stay true to himself, while coexisting gently with the world. After all, the best life is never about living up to others' expectations, but about living clearly and freely in your own time.